All right, so today I have the pleasure of being joined by Joshua Beekman, a Boston College legend, a former BC football player who graduated from BC with 2 degrees in 2005 and in 2006. He played 5 seasons for the BC Eagles, where he's a first-team All-American selection in his senior year, was also team captain that same year. He then went on to be drafted by the Chicago Bears in the 2007 NFL Draft, was a fourth-round selection for them, played 3 years of Chicago, and then had stops with the Florida Tuskers in the UFL, and then also spent some time with the Indianapolis Colts and the Jacksonville Jaguars, playing professionally from 2007 to 2012. He is now the current Director of Alumni Programming for BC Athletics. He works with a lot of former BC student athletes and keeping them engaged with the campus. And he is also a BC Hall of Famer, was inducted into the Varsity Club Hall of Fame in 2022, which was a very well-deserved honor. Joshua, thank you so much for taking the time to meet me today. How are you doing today, Beeks?
Joey, thank you for actually having me. I apologize. I know we've been talking about this for a year and a half. So, one, I'm thankful that you're available on my short schedule to finally get this in. But no, pleasure. Thank you for the introductions. One, it's like you forget some of the stuff you did. And I think with some me and some of my teammates that I got to play with, they're really legends, obviously, like B.J. Raji, Matt Ryan, Matthias Kiwanukas. You just did the work, right? And then whatever accolades came or accreditations came, they came. But it's funny. I'm like, man, I forgot about that. Yeah, I did do that. Oh, yeah, that did happen. So appreciate you taking me back down memory lane.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time. I know obviously it's a busy time of year for you. So thanks so much for taking the time to make this happen. I know we talked about it over the years, getting this done, and here we are today making it happen. So thank you again. An honor to have you on. You're a BC legend, as I said. And when you look back at all the things you accomplished at BC, 2 degrees, Varsity Club Hall of Famer, obviously was a first-team All-American, made the NFL. You have a lot to be proud of, Beek, so I'm glad I was able to look back and help you reflect on all of the success you've had over your career so far. So thank you again for taking the time. My first question for you today is, where did your love for the game of football begin?
I think the love began at a young age, and I think as much as players say they play for themselves, you play for a parent, right? Like you're chasing dad's respect, you're chasing mom's respect. Doesn't matter male or female. I think it's if mom was this great, whatever, you want to chase that greatness, right? If it's from a piano or if it's on a field or a court or in the choir, I think that's one of the loves you find your passion. Now, I think I didn't love it at an early age. I think I was voluntarily told to go run around and burn some energy. But luckily, having two older brothers that played the game, and then eventually friends that you're with, the camaraderie is what it tried to teach you. The story of my father, who again went to Dell State on scholarship. What the tool, that tool is a wrench, a jackhammer, crowbar, however you classify the tool of sport, propelled him to get a college degree, meet his wife of 30 plus years. I should know how long my parents have been married for. Or no, actually longer than that, like 45 years. Mom and dad, I'm just glad you're still together. I should know the exact year. But I think that's the cool thing about sports in general. And as you grow into maturity, where they had me playing baseball early on as well. They had me playing basketball. I was terrible at baseball. Kid in the outfield picking daisies. Basketball, I thought I was Baby Shaq. Dad, unfortunately, had to tell me, you suck at basketball. In 10th grade, after a win, mind you, Joey, football is your future. But again, it helps hone you into the athlete you are as you play multiple sports. But I think I started to really love football as I was a giant kid, and parents were always like, don't be too aggressive. Don't do this. Be careful. If it's guys or girls bumping into kids. And then finally you get to go play football and it's like, all right, do whatever damage you can. Don't seriously try to hurt someone. And your dad looks at you like, go wreck someone. So I think that's where the joy finally came out. It was therapeutic somewhat.
Mm-hmm. And obviously having all the experience playing all the sports you did helped you, right? You learn what it's like being on a team. Even if it's a sport, like you said, baseball, a sport that you might have struggled with, you still get to learn what it's like being on a team, playing a sport. Obviously being young, you're learning the game, just like when you're playing the game of football, you're learning as a kid, right? Just like you learn in baseball. You get a lot of those skills down just from being on a team. So I'm glad, obviously, you chose football, because look at the career you had, making it, obviously, at BC, making it in the NFL. You had an illustrious sports career, truly. So definitely something to be proud of is picking the game of football, like you said, your dad helping you choose that, and then everything you did, all the hard work that you put in and the hours you spent working out, practicing, studying film, playing, all of those hours definitely paid off. And you look back at your high school career, Amsterdam High School, you're a big time player for them. You played both sides, offensive line and defensive line. And you obviously had a lot of offers coming out of high school, probably a lot of interest in the New England area, the New York area. What was it like being a top recruit in high school and having some colleges reach out to you? And what made BC stand out among the rest?
Yeah, no, I think it's not like it is today, where we had the old Big East, a lot of Northeast schools, and Michigan State had Notre Dame, and I think you really you had to have men that were really skillful at projecting. I think now, if you're a big kid, especially for O-line and D-line, they're going to probably gravitas towards you because, and I'm a little jealous as I am a plus size model still probably. There's not a lot of big people, but there was a lot of big people in my day. As my mom would say, you're big boned and God loves you. But no, I think the cool thing is I was blessed to have a myriad of schools that wanted to utilize me as much as I wanted to utilize them. But I had two great parents. Again, my dad going to school for football. And then also having two older brothers that should have played football, but unfortunately played D3 basketball, then D2 lacrosse. And then my dad, I think, was probably fed up with himself. And I tell this to kids, again, I said my dad told me I sucked at football, or basketball. Football is my future. And I tell kids nowadays, because you have to word it just right, if you garden or if you ever seen a gardener, they'll trim trees, they'll cut grass, they'll prune to make something bloom a little more. And I think I had a parent that, one, he was my D-line coach. That's probably why I wanted to focus more on offensive line play. Plus, I was probably better at that. But he wasn't a parent where it's like, my son's the greatest. He was hard and tough and had the discipline to say, hey, man, you got to work on that. And even through my time here, I remember eventually when I started playing at Boston College, I remember he would say, why'd Matt Ryan get hit in the third quarter? Why'd you have a holding call? Or why did coach yell at like three things right off the rip? And we won the game. And I'm like, man, you can't even say hi before and it was a grounding mechanism that I think most parents love their kids and they don't have that discipline to be critical because they don't want to come off as not loving or supportive. But I think in his way, it helped propel me to be, as a 6'2" offensive lineman, to get to a Boston College, right? I should have been overlooked. I should have, most people probably, I'm not bringing a 6'2" O-lineman in. Going back to recruiting, I think Dave Magazoo, with Tom O'Brien, both O-line guys, like my tape, like me, I was running around the field. I was trying to hit people. I was trying to get extra blocks. They probably saw that hustle. And then obviously probably the character, especially when they came for my home visit. I'll tell you about that in a second. But I think, again, there's metrics beyond just how tall you are, how fast you run right now that coaches are looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. And you obviously put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to make it to where you got to. And I think on film, you can see your hustle, your energy, and you obviously see you're a really good teammate too, right? You were a team captain here at BC, which is a tremendous honor. You were the Scanlan Award recipient too during your time here, which is a big time honor as well. So those are qualities that you could see. Obviously, when you're watching the game, you could see a guy hustling. But then you also see how great a person you are, right? And I think your coaches, and obviously Tom O'Brien, you mentioned him, when they get to meet you in person and have those home visits like you mentioned, they can see you're a great person, right? And I think that probably obviously helped as well in the recruiting process. So now we'll take a step and talk about your time at BC. You mentioned obviously the home visit with Tom O'Brien. What was that experience like with a legendary BC coach stepping in to your home and coming to visit you?
Well, I think one, as I look back on the Navy grad, if you took him out of Navy and you didn't know he was a Navy grad and you plugged him into Boston College, the service aspect of his being comes into fruition, right? That command structure would come into fruition. And I think it was funny. I remember to this day, Dave Magazoo, may he rest in peace, would come visit me, when it was appropriate during those time slots, give me a hug. You're my guy. But I remember him being quiet, sitting there with, the boss. And at the time, I'm just sitting there like a dopey young teenager. And then my dad's like, get Coach O'Brien ice. I'm good, sir. I don't need ice. Yes, you do. Get him ice. And I'm like going to get ice. Hey, he forgot a fork. No, that fell on the ground. Give him a new fork. And I think it was showing that I could take orders without bucking back. And I think, again, the coolest thing about what we built during my time period here with teammates is you got humbled. And I say that where I remember Dan Copen, to this day as a freshman, I walk in, he asks me a question, and he's like, shut up, da-da-da, he's grilling me. And I remember Chris Nee, obviously another legendary offensive lineman, saying, you can't yell at this kid before he starts talking. You can't ask him a question and tell him to shut up a little more intensely. I'm like, yeah, Chris Nee. But again, these guys that won, Dan Copen, how many Super Bowl rings with the Patriots, let alone then going to Denver and everything. Chris Nee, Super Bowl rings, how many years he played with the Giants. It was a discipline of honing me. Can I be humbled and humble myself, take order, take pride to lead eventually, right? And you mentioned, obviously, I was blessed to be a captain with Joel and Dunbar, who also went to the Hall of Fame. Matt Ryan, now that he's done playing in the NFL, when eventually he ever goes into the Hall of Fame, which, it'll be a slam dunk. Yes, across the board probably. But we humbled ourselves. We were competitors. And I think that was the coolest thing about the locker room, where if you were a walk-on to the starter, you said something. If obviously your good players are supposed to have their best practices and be their best, if the walk-on said, hey, that wasn't good enough, you took that to heart. It wasn't about credit. It wasn't about likes. It wasn't about anything except how good of a player. And you could say that to Matt Ryan, and he'd take it take personally, but he'd take it to heart, where did I work hard enough for you? And I think that brotherhood of working hard was cemented with Tom O'Brien, the Marine, who, you knew where the line was. And if you crossed the line, you were in trouble. As long as you did what he said. And obviously, like he said, champion in the classroom, champion, in the community, and then champion on the football field. You were golden.
Mm-hmm. And you learned a lot, obviously, from him, right? He was a big reason you ended up coming to BC, and obviously your time at BC helped shape your future as a professional. And I know you mentioned being a leader, being a team captain. You're a natural born leader, Beak. So even if you weren't a captain for the team, you were a leader at the end of the day. You don't need the C on the jersey to say that, right? But at the end of the day, you did obviously grow into your role. Like you mentioned, you talked about guys that are freshmen stepping on campus, practice squad players. The great thing about you, Beaks, is you look at everybody around you as an equal, right? Even when you were the captain, you probably treated every single player from the practice squad all the way up like they were the exact same. That's how you should do it, right? To be a leader, you do have to kind of look around and be there for other people. And at the end of the day, everyone's the same, right? You're all on the same team wanting to win. And obviously, O'Brien won a lot of games here, right, during your time here at BC. You mentioned, obviously, Matt Ryan, Chris Nee you played with, Matthias Kiwanuka. You were on a team with a lot of BC legends, including yourself, right? You guys all made the NFL. You were on a very special, run there, a part of an era of BC football where there was a lot of winning. A lot of guys made the NFL there. And I mentioned in some of the questions that I sent over to you, you were on a team, which I'll tell you right now what year it was. In 2006, you were on a team that beat 3 ranked opponents, Clemson and Virginia Tech included, and you finished 20th in the AP poll. What made that team? I know you mentioned everybody was kind of on the same playing field. Everybody was, dedicated to winning. What made that team special where you had 10 NFL players? Everybody was dedicated to trying to, work their craft and get better. What made that team different than, the other years you were on BC?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. It was about leadership, and I think that was instilled in the locker room. Yep. And it's kind of lost its way a little bit because of COVID and social media, but I still remember to this day. I remember, and I'll take it back to 05, where Matthias Kiwanuka and Pat Ross were named captains. And I remember Matthias Kiwanuka, no-brainer, obviously, the pedigree, the family name. When you talk about champion in the classroom, champion in the community, champion on the football field, and not that Pat Ross wasn't deserving, but he didn't have maybe the skill set that, Matthias Kiwanuka, who played almost a decade in the NFL, but got a few years, obviously, drafted and everything else. But I remember I was voting, I had my piece of paper. I put Matthias, and my next name, I didn't even have it covered, but I put Pat Ross. And someone goes, "You're not voting Jeremy Trueblood." And he said it loud. And I said, "No, I'm not." Now, Jeremy Trueblood, I love him. He just was back on campus. He'll be back for the first game for Red Bandana, bringing his daughters up, and he knows this. I love him. But at the time, Pat Ross was the better leader. Now, Trueblood, the better talent. He was the most penalized guy in the NFL for like 8 years and played like almost a decade, which I'm like, bro, I would have been fired because I'm 6'2", but you're like 6'7", 6'8". Played very aggressively. But again, it was also putting in who needs to be leaders. It wasn't just popularity contest. It wasn't just he's a senior. I remember even dating back when I'm playing in 8th grade high school football, and the coach is like, "This guy's playing with more heart than some of you seniors." And I'm in 9th grade, and I'm becoming that command structure. And finally, my friends, my senior year got to catch up with me. But it's not about maybe who's the most talented on a team. Yes, you need your best players to play, but leaders need to step up. And again, I go back to, I do remember, and this was a walk-on player to me, saying, "Beeks, you were just off today. It wasn't your best practice." And I didn't get mad. I actually said, "Thank you for saying that to me," because I was off. I remember I wasn't, my full tilt, run around. I need to see every look. And I would actually tell the scout team, "Hey, man, we're running power right here. We're past here." Again, when you're a freshman going against a guy who's like a 5th-year All-American, but I try to instill a sense of come at me, because if you embarrass me in practice, great. I'm okay with that. I don't need my dad saying, "Hey, bro, what happened? You got Matt Ryan hit and that 3rd and long," or something like that. And I think, again, that's where you have to flip that mindset. And again, we had a culture of competitive excellence. And I'll bring it even farther. I remember we were in upper campus, no AC. This is before technology and everything else. But I remember we're playing Monopoly, and we're all aggressive. And I had me, Matt Ryan, and someone else. And so we knocked someone else out. I'm about to die out. Matt's somehow about to win the game. He offers me, he goes, "Hey, let me buy your properties," because I think we were the 2 offensive players versus the defense guy. I said, "No, I'm not selling you my properties. I'm not losing. I don't care if I got to sell every property and roll the bones." And he looked at me. He goes, "Beeks, you're gonna lose." And I'm like, "I don't care." And so I roll, and then I had to give up selling my properties. He goes, "Beeks, I know you. All right, listen, sell me your properties. I'll buy you a pizza." "Sure, Matt, here you go to the next roll." I was done. And then, I think it was a defensive guy who went, "This is nonsense." Da, da, da. And then Matt ended up winning but again, we were so competitive that it didn't matter what it was. And I think that's a sense of purpose for young people that you can challenge without, getting to a fight. You can call out without, hurt feelings and straining the locker room. And I think that's luckily a culture we had where, and again, I'm jealous of the 07 team that went to the ACC championship. And I'm like, "I'm proud of you boys, but I wish it was me with you." And then the 08 team. And again, it was I think guys that I, helped groom or recruit or came back and had touch points, but it was a will to win that was etched in stone in their hearts. And I was very proud of after I left.
Mm-hmm. And you were part of building that team, right? Like Matt Ryan, you played with for a few years, right? I think 3 years you were on the team with Matt Ryan, right? And then there were guys that after you graduated, you went out to the NFL. There were guys that you helped along their journey at BC, even though you were gone, right? That following year in 2007, 2008, they learned a lot from you, Beeks, right? You still had an impact and effect on a lot of those players. And you obviously mentioned Matt Ryan, a player you blocked for 3 seasons. What was your experience like playing with him? A guy that obviously, like you, a natural born leader, both you and Matt Ryan.
No, I think the greatest thing about Matt Ryan is that everyone thinks Matt Ryan was this crystallized, perfect player coming in. Again, like me, he ran an option. He was an option quarterback, but he had family ties. Ironically, Matt would always say, "I'm not coming out of the game. You never know. There might be a Doug Flutie on the bench." And I'm like, "Matt, what are you talking about? Like, Doug Flutie's Doug Flutie." Obviously, the statue in the back. But his uncle, as I finally put this together, was replaced by Doug Flutie. And I'm like, and I still remember the shot he took at Clemson. I mean, I'm screaming at guys, "Who didn't block their guy? Why Matt?" And Matt's like, "Nah, I'm good. I'm good." Got back in the game, and you see it. And then I'm screaming at guys, and the coach is like, "God, it's a covered hit." there isn't a guy to block. He's looking downfield, made the throw, got blasted, but he stayed in the game. And I think that competitive nature of him, another few classmates of B.J. Raji. I remember B.J. Raji was talented. And I remember the D-line coach saying, "Hey, Beekman, I need you to go against B.J. Raji." I'm like, "I don't want to go against B.J. Raji every play." He's like, "No, I need you to go against B.J. Raji to make him better, but he's going to make you better." And I'm like, "Oh, I do need that." But also Ron Brace at the time, where may he rest in peace. He was 360, but my man was Gumby. Like, he could do a split at 360. And I'm like trying to block this guy, and all of a sudden he's wiggling out. And I'm like, this is insane. And again, as we won, obviously more talent came. But again, I think I chose BC as I turned down Michigan State over Boston College and some other schools. The spirit of the school resonated with me, right? I think, and I'm not at his level, but I say this as Luke Kuechly, one of the most God-fearing men who, again, his career in the NFL came up short, was just out there recording, celebrating him on his induction to the NFL Hall of Fame. No one wanted him. Notre Dame recruit. There's a lot of schools that didn't think and believe in him. And I think that's the one thing about BC is that with belief, with the right formula, you become an all-star. Zay Flowers, perfect example. Zay Flowers was a itty-bitty, do you play him at DB? Will he get beat? He's playing receiver, and you think he's probably 6'5", but he's just toasting kids. He's a competitor. He's the youngest of 15 kids, or maybe 14. I forget. But he has to have a big family. He was always like, I want to do more. I want to do more. Always in the limelight. Great heart. Again, hungry to do more. Again, those are the guys that do success here. Donovan Ezeraku. Now, we had a couple legacies with Ozzie Trapillo, Drew Kendo, that their fathers played here, what that means to them. Again, these formulas are tough nowadays with everything going on in the landscape of college football. But again, you hit the pride factor, you chase that emotional nerve of you're chasing your father, you're chasing that pride factor. And I even say Chris Lindstrom, and I was blessed to be an intern, or not intern, when I first got here. He's off to the side, quiet. And I remember one time we finally had our 20-minute conversation. Comes to my office, he's like, "Oh yeah, wear your number." I go, "Whoa, bro." I said, "You're not wearing my number. I might have worn number 75, but that's Mark Colombo's number." I said, "You got to be a first-round pick and play 10+ years to say that's even close to your number." Now he's on track to do that. Obviously, Walter Payton, Man of the Year. He's doing things that, yes, on the field, but I think emphasize the school. And I think that's one of the cool things. As much as you may leave here bitter, you may leave here, you turn back, and it's funny how guys are like, "This was the craziest, best time of my life at this weird Jesuit school named Boston College."
Mm-hmm. And you look back at your time, right? You've a lot of great memories, like you said, and it shaped you into the man you are today. And same thing with the guys you just mentioned, right? Kuechly, Flowers, all the careers that you guys had in the NFL. BC was the starting place, right? You learned a lot about the game of football, learned a lot about what it's like playing at the next level, and then you guys made it in the NFL. And I think when you look at your career, Beeks, right, you have a lot to be proud of, truly. And I think when you look back at your time at BC, one of the biggest honors, which I was reading about this, I didn't know as much about the Scanlan Trophy until I was reading a lot about your background, but you received the Scanlan Trophy back when you were a senior at BC, which is the highest honor bestowed upon a BC football player. And you look back at all the success you had as a player, and then that's an award that's something for what you do off the field, the service you do, and how great of a leader you are on the field as well. How much of an honor was it to get that award? Which obviously, having all of the success you had on the field, first team All-American, those are something to be very proud of. And I know you're dedicated to helping people in the service part of the game of football, where you can go to hospitals and do charity stuff and give back. You love doing that stuff, Beeks, more than anyone. How much of an honor was it to get that Scanlan Trophy?
Honestly, it was huge. It was bigger than obviously getting a Jacob blocking trophy of the ACC. And I say that where I'm thankful to the Matt Hasselbecks, right? Where he was the first orientation leader at Boston College football player. And again, then it was like, "Coach, hey, I want to be an orientation leader." And there's been a couple guys from Jim Eunice to Ty Hall. I think Mark Herzlich was one as well. Regardless if you were a starter or not, if you were disciplined enough to be able to do it and also, get your lift in and, get the practice when you can, but represent the school in a way where, again, sports in general is tough, right? We're already segmented. We're already coming in the summer. And luckily, I was blessed to be an upperclassman that was, one, entrusted that I could do it, but it also gave me real experience to maybe love football a little more. But when you're representing the Boston College brand where you're welcoming grandma's parents, legacy, and they're even telling you about BC and instilling in freshmen that come in what we do. And again, you touched upon if it's visiting hospitals, if it's working at campus school or shelters. I think that's the thing that helps all the guys that have ever been successful here in the metrics of on the field and off the field. Be where they're at. And I think that's the common thread of we have this DNA that's athletics, that's academics, but something of the heart. And I think that motivates you a little bit more when you say, hey, that kid that you went and visited, in a wheelchair. I could probably run a couple more gaspers. I'm tired. I don't want to lift this weight. Man, I luckily have two beautiful hands. So it gives you a perspective that, Tom Scanlan, who this award is named after, who lived up to this honor, that you're chasing greatness. And as I always tell the kids, like I just said with the Chris Lindstrom thing, leave the jersey better than you found it, right? Leave it so you want a guy to chase it. I know there's debates of like numbers being retired or anything like that. I would never want my number to be retired because I would want a kid to say, who was Josh Beekman or who was Mark Colombo or who was Chris Lindstrom, and chase to be the best football player they could possibly be, but yet the best version of a football player out of a Boston College man. And I think that's one of the cool things where you're going to get some great debates now with Zay Flowers, maybe Will Blackman, DB, converted receiver / the athletic abilities, that swaggerness. I'm not, old linemen don't have that swagger, but these great debates of how good do you press forward this idea that you were given at a school and during the time frame that you were at a school. Zay left and then finished this past summer, or Matthias Kiwanuka, who just came back and got his honorary doctorate that loves school. And I think that's the essence of what the Scanlan Award means. How badly will you try to be the example of leadership for your team, let alone your school?
Mm-hmm. And you're a true BC man, Beeks. You're the best man around. And I remember before we knew each other that well, I knew who you were, but we didn't know each other well when I was a student as an undergrad. But I remember probably the first few weeks when I got the job in the ticket office at BC, Spencer Bono, former BC football player, a player that you have a great connection with, he said, Beeks is the best man around. I remember him saying that and being like, I could tell he's a great guy. And at the time, we didn't know each other that well. But I was like, you could tell the way you carry yourself, Beeks, everybody which just in the walk over to Campion Hall, where we are today, recording in different classrooms, you saw two people that you knew right away, people saying hello, waving to you, and you really are the best man around, Beeks. And I think that you were an exemplary example of that back when you were a player. You mentioned obviously trying to do the little things, right? Doing stuff at the campus school, some shelter work, right? Food, when you guys were doing stuff for like Thanksgiving and stuff, food drives, right? You were always looking to help other people, Beeks, and see how people are doing. And the people you just saw on the walk over here right away, how are you doing? How was your summer, right? That's an example of a leader right there, Beeks. Somebody that's able to connect with every person, doesn't matter where they're from, what they do at BC, what they do for work, even if they're outside of BC. You can connect with anyone, Beeks. And you are, Spencer said it then, and I agree with them, and I echo it to every person I meet now. You're the best man around, Beeks, truly. So you obviously do deserve that Scanlan Trophy, and that's just one of the accolades you got here at BC. And I'm going to break down this question. It's a big one. You had a lot of honors, especially your senior year here at BC. You were a first-team All-American, which is a big-time honor. You were the recipient of the 2006 Jacobs Blocking Trophy for the most valuable blocker in the ACC. And you also received the Walter Camp Foundation second-team All-American honor and was also a first-team All-ACC that same year. So that 2006 year was a very special year for you. How much of an honor was it for you to end your time at BC with all of those big-time accolades?
Well, I think I was touched because, again, we're defense, you always hear the saying, the love you show your teammate is by the time the tape ends, how close you are to the ball, right? Or, indicative to closing of the tape of whistle of the ball, right? And I think with the Jacobs blocking award, I think, again, I was always trying to love my teammates. If it was the running back, Matt Ryan on a scramble, not many times, but or if he's throwing it down field to Challenger or any of the receivers, again, can I get down there to help support them as five guys we're going to try to, wail on them? And I think going back, tying it in, obviously, I luckily had Barry Gallup, who was never the head coach here at Boston College, but a guy who played here, then coached here, then left to be a head coach somewhere else, came back to be a DFO and during my time, and then an AD. Again, showing you what a BC man is, right? Like maybe you're not the head coach, but how can you serve and how can you help instill and pour in? And then he's helping present me with his award. And then he always reminded me, you're the only one from Boston College to get this award, Josh. So you should be thankful. I'm like, thank you, coach, appreciate you. No, you better be thankful. Stop just passing it off. But again, you have legends of the ultimate probably BC man, and there's others that are at BC. But I think that was a cool thing of winning that award and teammates being like, yeah, stop hitting us as much as you wanted a secondary block. And I think that's where, again, you weave a team together of talents, right? Maybe you're not the quickest, but can you be the shiftiest, right? Can you be the most enduring? Can you be the smartest, right? And this goes back to, again, scout team players that, hey, I have one play, one duty, but they cherished their job, their one duty, the one thing they had to do that game, or if it was to get me ready. And I remember this play because I was an upperclassman. I got blown up when I was a wee freshman and, tripping on my feet and getting knocked down by walk-ons and my coach being like, we gave you a scholarship. But I remember being an upperclassman and I remember doing a pole play and I'm looking inside and a corner cat blitz came. And all of a sudden at the last second, I turned and I luckily stuck it enough where I didn't get blown up. And then I was like, oh, it was a good hit. Like you heard smack. And I'm like, oh, that was a good one. And I heard the kid, oh, sorry, Beeks. And I go, no. In the game, he ain't going to say sorry. He's going to level me. And I'm not sure if he really choked it down or saw me and didn't want to hurt me. But I said, oh, that was a good hit. I'm going to remember the game. So every time I would pull, I'd be like, look out, scan inside out, not just thinking. But it improved that your football IQ because it wasn't just a holding back. It wasn't a watered down version. It was live basically. And it was, you're going to go get hurt at practice. And I remember OB could just be like, move it up 10 yards. And it was a real move it up 10 yards. And you see a guy on film and the trainers all helping them out. But again, the love that walk-on bringing and trying to hit me as hard as he could, knowing that he may never get in the game, that was the look I needed. And again, if it was me, if it was Matt Ryan, if it was guys who were Shirless, if it was L.V. Whitworth, if it was Derek Knight, and I'm going through different eras of guys, we practiced like we were going to war. And I think that was the coolest thing that helped us with our greatest success here.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned, obviously, Derek Knight, Andre Callender, L.V. Whitworth, 3 top 10 rushers in BC's program history. You helped, pave the way for their success, right, as a blocker. Those were 3 very talented players at BC, 3 legends, like you just mentioned, guys that we're always looking to get better, just like you, Beeks. And you mentioned, obviously, having a great respect for the practice players, right? Guys that were walk-ons. And Spencer Bono mentions that, too, how anytime that the scout team was doing well against the first team offense, first team or second team offense, whatever it was, and some guys were getting upset with the scout team playing too hard, you were always saying in practice to them, well, stop losing your reps then, right? Just like you just mentioned, right? It's getting you ready for those games on Friday nights, Saturdays, all of those extra hits. You mentioned that hit from that scout team player that helped you on that next game, right? You were already ready, looking upfield, ready to know where to look for a guy coming to, take you out so you can't get upfield and get more blocks, right? You were ready for that next step because of that. And I have one more question for you, Beeks, about your time at BC as a player, and then we're going to move on to talk about your NFL career. But you look back at your career, is there a specific game, a specific play, a specific memory that was your favorite at your time at BC? And it could be, I said one of those 3 things. It could all coincide in one, however you want to answer it.
No, I would say game. It was probably Wake Forest. I want to say it was 04. We were down probably by 30 points. Game's pretty much over. Everyone's left, but there was literally a mentality of we will not quit. I remember Matt Ryan, we go in and we started coming back, and we ended up winning the game. It was a downpour. I think our fans started leaving because it was just every yitz and every bad thing that was probably could happen was happening. I think we were fumbling. I think it was just we weren't catching, run game. But we came back. And I think the play that really stands out to me is I remember we were playing at BYU and we had a great play, and all of a sudden I got called for holding. And I remember Tom O'Brien cussing me out, fussing me out. And this is probably why he did it, because he called a screen. And I remember we threw a quick out screen, the Will Blackman. I destroyed whoever was covering him. And then I'm like running downfield. I got a safety block. And then I'm like trying to turn back. But then Will's like, keep running, stop turning around. And I'm like trying to get a third. And I do remember even my mom said after that game next to my dad, oh, you must have been mad because you were like just you kept trying to turn back. And Will was like, go in front, like, keep running. Like, so that was a fun play. I know it's on tape somewhere. And I was like, yeah. And secretly, I think I was mad at Coach Tom O'Brien for like yelling at me. And it was like silent as day. You could hear him, big man, you done. But he probably did it just to gas me up, knowing his personality of players and who I am. But that was a fun, probably the best play, and then obviously the best game versus Wake Forest.
Mm-hmm. It's a great memory there, though, being down where you're down. And you guys, like you said, you guys are all competitive players. So even if you're down by 30, you're still going to be locked in trying to, cut the deficit any way you can, get back in the game. And that's a BC way, right? You never quit. I have one more question about BC, and this kind of relates more to when they had their first Red Bandana game, obviously 2014, I believe that was, against USC. What does a Red Bandana game mean to you to honor Welles Crowther with the game every year here at BC?
So I actually am jealous because we never had the Red Bandana game. Obviously, I was a senior in high school when the towers fell. And personally, I'm probably glad because I'd probably get thrown out of the game. The way I would play was probably the passion and what the Red Bandana would mean to me if I'm able to play as a 40-year-old man now. But I think it's about legacy, right? Like, yes, it's a football game, but you're playing in the honor of someone. To me, it's like someone who lays their life down. If it's Pat Tillman, if it was someone that saved, other people other than Welles Crowther, and I say this where a soldier who saved his unit, right, or jumps on a grenade, that sacrifice that you love someone so much that you gave your own life, right? That's in my good book. I think that would have me at a state where, again, I'd probably get ejected and I would have to try to wheel back my emotions so much. But again, I think, and I had a good friend, Ricky Brown, who was actually on USC at the time, saying, hey, you're going to play Boston College in this first game. Guys, get right. And again, he said it thinking, hey, they're gonna bring it. And again, Coach Adazio, that team played with pure emotion of pride. And I think, again, you need those metrics sometimes, those big games beyond you. But that's where I think we kept the level of familiarity through our careers. If it was, Matt Ryan, Jeremy Trueblood, Temple, like whoever it was, we had pride for each other. But I think if you throw a magnifier on like the Welles Crowther Red Bandana game, what that means for the nation, oh yeah, we're in trouble. Like, it may be chaos even for Coach Tom O'Brien, the controls.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Like you said, it's the tradition to honor Welles' legacy. And I wish they had it as a game back when you were a player. I know they did it just about probably 7 years after you played, right? So you left BC here and graduated. Your last year playing was 2006. You were, drafted in the NFL 2007. I think the first one was in 2014. So 7 years after you played. But it would have been special to have that, like you mentioned, being able to play and, play with the same passion that guys are playing with today, right? The Welles Crowther game every year is a game players look forward to be able to try to honor Welles. And you obviously mentioned some other guys in there as well, like Pat Tillman, a guy that, gave, his life for his country. And I look back now at your time in the NFL, Beeks, which you were drafted 4th round to the Chicago Bears in the 2007 NFL draft. Before that, you obviously did the NFL Combine. What was the pre-draft process like with the NFL, and what was the NFL Scouting Combine like for you?
Well, I think pre-draft, you're probably more ignorant to the lack of understanding, right? Where, yes, you're going to be doing drills, but the commercialization of what football is, and it's somewhat becoming that now. And I think eventually there will be a correction. But I think you're also meeting. You have to be prepped to have meetings. You never know who you're going to meet. The prep of who's the owner of which team, the head coach, the DC or the OC, the position coach that you're going to see, the mind game test that I remember I had, throwing goggles on me and they're like throw beans and then you're missing and they want you to autocorrect and how you learn. Again, the Wonderlic test. Again, all these metrics because again, no one wants to look foolish, right? As a scout, no one wants to look like they didn't do their homework. As you're not gifting a guy this opportunity of millions of dollars, you want to just get it right. Like you can make all the right moves and still get it wrong. Or Tom Brady again passed over, popped right, or the sure brain first rounder you think didn't work out for whatever reason. But I think one of the coolest things is understanding how business like it is. But if you probably live by the golden rules, do under others, be ready, be cordial, and then just enjoy the game as the young man you are, I think most of the time you're going to do fine. It's when, the camera's there and guys are like trying to run a little extra harder or, the shirt and he's, no, just go play ball. If you have the talent and I say that across the board of all positions, they will see that you have the talent and try to bring you on that team.
Mm-hmm. And obviously they saw that, right? Chicago saw something in you in the pre-draft process, not only on film, but I'm sure in the interviews that you were not only a great player, you're a great person, Beeks. And they made the right selection taking you in the 4th round. How special was that getting that phone call from them during the NFL draft, you'd be selected by them?
Well, it was very good. And again, the metrics of, 6'4", 6'5", you want 6'7" guys, you want bigger people. But luckily, I went to a team where Olin Kreutz should be a Pro Hall of Fame center. He's not that big, but he's powerful. And he's smart as whip. As I remember being in games with him, he's like, I see ghosts. Like he knew corner blitz, safety blitz, changing the mic to the will. So then the running backs on a safety or a corner. Such an impressive like football IQ. And then Roberto Garza the same way, who played 13 plus years on a torn ACL. You talk about determination. Somehow, some way, you're playing at a high level for that long. And again, I think I'm thankful to the Bears. Obviously, the bulk of my professional career was there and then bounced around. But I think the cool thing is, you had Lovie Smith, who was a God-fearing man. Now he's retired. Obviously, he's probably have sons now in the business. But again, probably what I needed at the right time. Wish it was probably longer, but like as Luke Kuechly said, hey, the game ends how it's going to end. You never know what you're going to get out of it. But he maximized every day. I try to maximize every day. And then some of the things, even being cut from the Chicago Bears and those platforms of going through that helped me at Boston College mentoring young kids. So again, God had a perfect plan, even though I didn't maybe like it at the time or love it at the time. But I think it's one of the cool things that I was blessed to be in a cool city that my parents could either drive to within 10 hours or just hop on a flight and then get to see their youngest.
Yeah, make the NFL. I mean, they get to see their youngest not only, play a season because you were in the NFL, you were in Chicago for 3 years, and like you said, you bounced around Florida Tuskers for a little bit, Indianapolis Colts, Jacksonville Jaguars. You made a great career out of it, Beeks. You have a lot to be proud of. And Chicago obviously is a big time sports town. What was that like playing in Chicago with obviously Soldier Field? You're right in the water there. It gets really cold. What was that like playing there, especially for a fan base that, has a lot of passion in Chicago?
No, I actually loved it. Again, there is a huge fan base that's so proud of being called a Chicago Bear. And I know they're in the crux of maybe moving and all that. But again, I think when you think about the history of the Chicago Bears, right, you think about O-line, the D-line, you think about the running back, Peyton, who was running through people, over people, walking back and doing it all over again. And again, I think it's a town that was built for tough-nosed, hard-nosed people. And obviously this game has evolved where the tickets get a little pricier and maybe you don't get to every game, every season. But again, I think a lot of players come from a background that have family backgrounds like that, where if it's I would be a steel worker, a fisherman, a farmer, a cop, military background, teacher, whatever your parents did. If your parents were blessed to be lawyers or whatever, it's about hard work. And I think that's the cool thing about Chicago, that you better give everything you got to a city that is all about hard work. And I think I loved all my teammates that were all stars, right? Like, Tillman, you had Lack, you had Cruz, you had Briggs. I think the coolest thing is we had Orlando Pace at one point. There was guys that you're coming to do the work. And again, you had a leader in my time there, Lovie Smith, that as much as he had to learn to become a head coach, and I think he started cooking it and getting Chicago where it needed to go. Again, all metrics, eventually they may replace you or whatnot, but I was very thankful to have him as my first head coach in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. And a storied coach, right? He made a long time career as a coach we were talking today, from high school all the way made it to the NFL, right? Like, he had a great career and a great resume, and you obviously got to play for him. So that's something that's a tremendous honor for you, and obviously Lovey as well, being able to coach you, Beeks. You're a very coachable player. So I'm sure he remembers that from his time with you in Chicago. You look back at your time in Chicago, 2007 was your rookie year. You made your debut against the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field. What was that moment like, Beeks? Were you nervous stepping onto the NFL field for the first time?
Well, it's funny. My first year, I was kind of you need to learn to raise your level and get ready for the league. And then when I finally suited up, it was at Green Bay. Obviously, you got Favre, you got Rodgers. Now you got Luck there, but it's funny. I was suited up, and my very first actual plays in the game were actually at D line. A couple of D linemen went down, and I got put on field goal block, and I'm like, what? All right, coach calls, hey, this is where you're gonna be. You see that? You're the T. You're the T. You got to get the push. And I'm running in there, and I'm like, all right, all ready to go. And I see Lack, and he goes, get over there, switch with him. And I'm like, yes, sir. And I switch over where he wanted to push side versus a D lineman. And then the coach goes, what are you doing? I said, Lack movement. Okay, you're good. And I'm like, all right, as you do what you're told, but obviously the field general moves you, you get moved. He was like, just have this gap, stay here. I want this guy here. But no, I think it was one of the coolest things. You get to, again, regardless of where you're a fan in the NFL, and I know there's many people out there that, especially this New England area, that for the Pats, but you get to step on some legendary fields and moments, and you think about the history and these players that came before. You give homage to that, and as much as you have to tune that out a little bit, you get to say, "Hey, I got a piece of that. I got to cement my legacy." Now, if it was for one play, 10 plays, or 10 years, it's an achievement in and of itself just to at least step on that field.
Mm-hmm. And the biggest thing that I always look at is the drop off from high school to college is big, and then college to the NFL, right? There's a lot of great college players that don't make it in the league, don't have a successful career in the NFL, because you're really competing for a limited amount of jobs, right? There's 32 teams, 53 players on each roster. It's not like college football where there's hundreds of teams between the FBS and the FCS. There's a limited amount of players that can make it at the next level in play. And Beeks, you had a great career. You made it right in the NFL, and you shared the field with Brian Urlacher, which that's a story you never told me before. See, that's why this podcast is great. You share a story there of jumping in on the D line that not many people may not know that. A lot of people know you, but they might not know that part of your career. What was it like sharing a locker room with, you mentioned Brian Urlacher, Lance Briggs, Matt Forte, Greg Olsen, Charles Tillman, Devin Hester? What was it like sharing a locker room with a lot of guys that obviously had a lot of success in the league? That when you're a young player stepping in a locker room like that, were they able to kind of show you the way of what it's like trying to make it at the NFL level and be a successful player?
They were. I think one of the coolest things I do remember. They knew how to be very serious when it needed to be time, and smart as a whip. And they actually did it in different ways. And I remember in Chicago, I'll say I remember being a rookie with Greg and Forte, and I remember we just played our first game. We lost to San Diego, and we're all mad and we're like upset. And then at the time, we're still getting paper checks. It's not direct deposit. And I see we're like freshmen, rookies in there, and Tillman comes in, and Lack walks in, and Briggs walks in, and they're like, "Oh man, we see envelopes. We just opened our check." And we're like, "All right, this is pretty nice. We're working this hard to help our families, everything else." And I remember these guys because we lost, but they knew how to take moments to give us levity. And so Tillman opens up his check, and all of a sudden he goes, "Oh man, that got heavy," and drops it to the ground. And I remember Lack opened his, and all of a sudden then he goes, "Oh man," he's like, "Clean it." They cleaned it, and then they go, "Briggs, open yours. You just got the new chopper. Open yours." And then he opens his, and all of a sudden he drops to the ground. And they're like, "Come on, get it up." And he does a clean, and then he's like, "Come on, put it over your head." And he has his envelope, and all of a sudden he's like, "I can't do it." And they're like, "You can do it." They're both on both sides. And all of a sudden he pops it over his head like a clean jerk. And they're like, "Ah." And then all of a sudden they go, "All right, that was fun." And they walk out. And me and all the other rookies are looking at each other, and we just put our checks away. We go, let's go back to meetings. But again, I think it's ways of bringing levity. And one of the coolest things is I remember they had something called the movie game, right? Where at the time, let's just say you said Ocean's 11, right? So you're going off of George Clooney, Brad Pitt, whoever Matt did. And then all of a sudden you said Jason Bourne. So then you're like, okay, you went off of Matt Damon. So you had to think of characters, and it made you think. And I remember we would do this just before, football really activities. We were doing it during stretch a little bit. And I remember one guy was like, "Big Man, Dark Knight, who you got?" Like, and I was like, and I'm like, American Psycho. Like, as a rookie, you're like, you better be smart enough to like comprehend like who you're going after. And I remember Lance Briggs. And I remember one guy goes, "Time." It was on cruise. He goes, "Time out." I'm calling bullshit. He would watch Hallmark movies because I guess he had all sisters. He started naming people, and we were like, "That's not a movie." And then he would like call a trainer over. "I want to look it up, look it up." And Briggs would be like, "Yo, I watch movies. I got sisters." Like, and we were like, "This ain't name brand." But he was so smart, and it quantified where I would be in practice, and Briggs would be like, Lack would point at something, and they grunt. It wasn't even words at times. Like you had code words, they were like, and it was like, what? Like, off the camera for a second. And all of a sudden, I'm like, they'd be on whatever the play is. Like they were that smart. And again, every team probably had it differently. I did remember when I went to the Colts for a little bit, camp coffee, basically. The trainers would say, "Hey guys, you better be smart receivers because you're gonna get some riddles." And I'm like, trying to make the team, whatever. And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And the guy's like, "Oh, Payne will throw some riddles at you." He wanted to know how smart you are, right? Like he'd give you a riddle and depend on the answer. And I remember one time, I remember the question was twins but not twins, two kids, kids born but not twins, but twins or something like that. And not to be morbid, I said, "Well, one died." And the trainer looked at me because everyone was stumped. He goes, "Not the answer I was looking for, but technically could go." And it was like triplets or something, or quadruples. Like he wanted to see if you think outside the box, because when he's giving you routes and he's telling you stuff, and I remember Peyton Manning was a machine. He walked in the year I was there, he was injured. And I remember he got done with throwing. He like threw 200 times. He was only supposed to 50. He walks up on a walkthrough, plays wrong. And all of a sudden I'm like in the back trying to make the team. I'm like, "What?" Like, huh? And I'm like, "Yo, I know QB's run the. And Peyton's like says it again. And then he like looks at coaches. The play was ran wrong. They huddled. And they're like, "Oh yeah, the Y didn't like cross." He's like, "Yeah, play was wrong." And I'm like, no one else said anything. I don't even think I think I was like day 2 there, late in the camp. And I'm like, "Yo, my man knows his offense." But again, it's smart people, it's capable people, it's challenging people. It's when to I would say when to bring the bravado or the gusto, but also when to, say, "Hey, they need a time to be a friend. They need a time to get lucid." And I think that's the cool thing about veterans in the locker room. As you said, 1% of high school kids go on to college, right? And I feel bad now that a lot of parents are probably looking at their kids like commodities, and it's getting a little crazy out there, even in high school, trying to get money, things like that. But then less than 1% of college kids go to the NFL, because now you have guys like Peyton Manning who have been there till they're almost 40 years old. And you have to, you got to dethrone a guy who's, I got kids. This is my job. I understand what that means, right? Like Ray Lewis, like the guys that have been there so long, Aaron Rodgers, like these are guys that you got to understand. They've been doing it for a long time, and yes, maybe they came in as the walk-on or the undrafted free agent. Maybe they were the first-round pick, but they understand what it means to be there. The Jeff Saturdays of the world, they were breaking construction, and what it is to truly say, I need to dethrone this guy. How good I have to be to replace him, and sometimes having the right contract does help. Wish I got a couple more of those, but you know what? The Lord provides. The Lord provides.
But hey, you made a great career of it, Beeks. And I appreciate you sharing those stories about Brian Urlacher, Lance Briggs, Peyton Manning. Those are all very special experiences, being able to, learn from guys like that, right? You mentioned Peyton Manning, a guy that even when injured is still out there, leading by example, still getting out there, getting his reps in, and obviously has the ability and the power to go in and into a practice and say, hey, this play's not ran right. And everyone believes him and knows he's right because of how much he knows the playbook and how much he knows the offense. I have a couple more questions, Beeks, about your NFL career, and then I'll ask you a couple other questions as well. But in the 2008 season for Chicago, you played all 16 games, started all 16 games for Chicago. That was an offensive line where I believe every starter was healthy that entire season, and you had the same offensive line for all 16 games. What did you learn from your first year as a professional in 2007 that helped you make that jump in 2008 to be a starter? And also, how'd you stay healthy, right, over that entire season in 2008?
Well, I think the number one thing is if you want to get paid, you better be on the field. And I think the scary thing is I was in a group where the youngest guy in the room was probably 7 years into the NFL. So I'm like year zero, or maybe I had 1 year because it was and I remember one of the guys said, "Oh, I'm so glad you're in the room now." Because he was like the guy who was getting yelled at, and he had 7 years in the NFL, and you had guys like Reuben Brown, Olin Cruz, like I said. I mean, you had guys that are probably going to be Pro Bowlers, 12 plus years, and I'm like, oh man, I'm going to get crucified. But I think one of the cool things is they grounded me, they grinded me, but they grounded me. Where I remember as a rookie, you're picking up McDonald's. $50 of worth of McDonald's, maybe $5 get eaten. So, in the BC fashion, I would go to the cooks and the cleaners and I'll be like, hey, listen, we're about to fly out. What do you guys like from McDonald's? I knew I needed to get a couple hash browns, one sandwich for maybe one guy who's really going to touch it. The rest I'd buy, like, what do you guys want? Please take this with you, with your families, right? And then my fine system, and because I didn't have any fines my first year, they actually said you need to have new money every fine every Tuesday or whatever. So if my fine was $100, all right, they want $100 American. Then the next was pesos. Then the next was Hong Kong dollars. Then it was pounds. So I actually lost money converting it into money. And then at the end of the year, they buy a gift for the O-line coach, and they were like, all right, convert all your money back. And I'm like, so I already lost money on the fee. All right, I'm losing money on the conversion. The money doesn't add up. Beats your fine didn't add up. Put it in the kitty. And again, it's a way to say, will you follow even though you don't like the orders? And I think the greatest thing is I was probably a fanatic, as it was like, got to do it right. You're chasing, 12 plus year guys, I think it was a very tight discipline group. Again, the examples I told you about the humor of the locker room, the pressure relieving moments, but it was so tight, that it didn't burst the pipes, but you also hoped to make diamonds. And I think that was one of the cool things, having an O-line coach that was fanatical, and Harry Heason, that to this day, when he got relieved and then went to Notre Dame, my wife would say, oh, you miss Harry now. And I'd come home and I'd be like, I'd fall like right on the carpet, and I'd be like, give me 5 minutes back. I'm just going to stay here for And then I move to the sofa and I get on the sofa. I'm like, no, just give me 10 minutes. And then my wife would probably bring me food. I'd eat. And then she's like, go get in bed. She probably finally put me in bed. And I remember after my time was done, she goes, oh, remember those times you'd be on the floor and you'd be like, oh, Harry just broke us. Harry would like run us into the ground. Oh, you missed that. Don't you wish you still had that? And again, I think at the time you're getting grinded, you're getting pounded on. You don't love it, but those are the people making you into weapons. And I'm very appreciative of many days I literally would drag myself up the stairs, fall onto the carpet, roll over onto the sofa, eat some food, get like woken up by my wife, go get in bed. She set my alarm because again, it was the people behind you that made you great.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All those blood, sweat, and tears that you put into game of football, right? Those tough workouts, those long flights, everything, right? The commute, from games, right? You guys had to fly all across the country when you play in the NFL. That tires you out, right? All those practices and the flights and traveling, and you obviously always have to be on time with everything, right? Which is important, right? In the game of football, you got to be on time to your meetings, you're on time to the film sessions. But all that discipline really did help, right? It gives you that structure that has set you up for success. And this was an interesting stat I saw today, Beeks, and this is a question I want to ask you, is in your time in the NFL, over 3 seasons in Chicago, you played 28 games for the Bears, making 20 starts. You only had 6 penalties in those 28 games, Beeks. 2 holding calls, 4 false starts. How did you stay so disciplined on the field, and how did you maintain proper technique, especially when you're in the NFL and you're playing guard most of the time you're in the league? You're going up against a lot of guys that are strong and built. How do you always maintain strong technique?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. It was about accountability that luckily I learned here at Boston College, right? And then you factor in they take it out of your paycheck if you do mess up, if you're not wearing the right thing. So again, there was habits built in early enough where even today, I think I was talking to Eli Jones this past summer when he was here for a wedding, and he said there was guys that got cut because they went to the wrong hotel driving somewhere, and because of whatever reason they didn't look at the right address or they went to the wrong Hilton. They show up and then the next day they're cut. It's discipline on little things now that I think go a long way. And I think the coolest thing is I was fanatical. I think it was fear, but you didn't want to let your teammates down. It wasn't like I don't want to be the weak link. And I do remember some plays where I'm like, oh, I jumped off sides, and all of a sudden I'm looking like, oh man! And then all of a sudden you get zoomed in by the NFL. Like the only time that you get love as an NFL lineman is like they think you did something wrong or you did something wrong. And again, you don't want to be that guy. You just again, stay with the herd. But I think the discipline of the group was so professional. Again, when it was time to play or you were goofing off, great. And then all of a sudden the meeting door shuts, flip your book open, lock in. What are we doing versus all cap blitz, remike, and you're like, you better be able to follow. It's like walking into a advanced Spanish class or Latin class, and all of a sudden you're like, man, I just wanted to do a little Duolingo, just for fun. It's very, I guess, very prideful. It's almost, as I tell people, I could make a great butcher. I could not make a good surgeon. I could definitely cut things open, but I don't think you want me to be the guy to try to put your spleen in or take care of that. I can take it out. I can help that, but don't ask me to, do the minutiae things.
That's a funny analogy, Beeks. But you're right. You when you played, obviously with those guys like Brian Urlacher, Briggs, you mentioned in the locker room things are playful when they had to be, and then you guys had to lock in and be locked in, and film sessions, obviously getting ready for the game in the locker room, you guys were locked in when you had to be. And now I want to ask you, Beeks, about your post-playing career, which you were an offensive line coach, graduate assistant offensive line coach at Eastern Kentucky, then at Florida International University, and then you were the offensive line coach for Concord University for a year as well. What was your experience like as a coach? Was that a difficult transition now teaching the game? Obviously, you were a player for so long. Was it difficult now teaching the game?
Yeah, no, I think one, it's hard to be a coach nowadays because can you get kids to want to hear you? But then another thing is, are you communicating effectively, right? Now, luckily coming from the NFL, kids were like, oh, I want to lock in on what this guy's talking about. But there's many guys like that, and I think the person that I hope to be as a coach, the late Dave Magazoo, the late Don Horton. Again, I mentioned Harry Heaston, like these guys that wanted to destroy you in the fact to make you better and ready for everything as like drill sergeant fanatical. But also, I think for me, is these men that changed my life. Right, I have a great relationship with my father, but again, coaches are these pseudo second fathers, right? What are you doing also mentoring these men? And now some of them have kids. Now some of them has said, Coach, some of the things you said, you were absolutely right. They look at you crazy. I'm like, yep, you're going to call me back just like my coach would say something. And I'm like, and then you don't have to call me, but I'll get a text from a kid from Eastern Kentucky or Concord or even the JUCO. And again, it's the life lessons that help them beyond the game. As you know, it fell to me where it was not for long. A perfect example. He was an O lineman at Garden City, Kansas, where I was an O line coach. He called me up. You know, not the best mom father situation, but got to college, got a degree. But then post sport, said, Coach, I'm trying to find a job. I'm struggling. And he was at a high school, and I literally one of the best things I said to him. I said, take the job no one wants. And he's pausing. And I go, listen, go to the principal of the high school and tell him I said this. You want a job no one else wants. If it's the summer school, you got to be the janitor or the hall monitor or whatever. And I said, you better do it well, because then he'll trust you with a job everyone wants. Everyone wants the glamorous job. It's the job that no one really wants. And I think that was one of the cool things of the O-line coaches I mentioned. I don't think they would care. No, they want to get paid, don't get me wrong, but they would do the job just as effectively as if it was D1, D3, D2, NAA. I think I messed that one up. Yes, thank you. Or if it's the NFL, they would do it as a professional with passion. And I think that's one of the cool things that I thought about getting into the sport of coaching as I found my identity post-sport, what I want to do. And again, God has given me a pathway from not just coaching, but then Director of Football Initiatives to now Director of Alumni Program.
Mm-hmm. And when you were the Director of Football Initiatives here at BC, you obviously created a great relationship with a lot of former Eagles that have done big things now in the NFL. You mentioned Zay Flowers, A.J. Dillon, Matt Milano, John Johnson III, Justin Simmons. A lot of the guys over the years that you've stayed in touch with have, done big things in the NFL. Chris Lindstrom being another. How gratifying is it for you when you served as a mentor for them here at BC to see them go on and do big things in the NFL and to obviously maintain a relationship with them? Obviously, now you're the Director of Alumni Programming. You're staying in touch with a lot of these guys. How gratifying is it to see them go and do big things in the NFL, and then for guys that didn't make the NFL go on and have great careers outside the game?
Well, I think the one thing when I was Director of Football Initiatives, it wasn't I'm just yelling at the best player or not the best player. I'm yelling at everyone across the board. And I think, again, you gave leeway to players that started to pop like a Zay Flowers, but you'd be like, hey, Zay, I didn't see you in class. Or Zay, you got to do this. Or Zay, you got some paperwork. And it was like, yeah. So even the walk-on, I'm like, hey, man, you better not do, have anything ready or not have things done. And it's like, yes, yeah. But I think, again, you treat them all as if they were your little nephews, as I say, as I'm a little older, or your cousin or whatnot, as you walk through the locker room, because then they respect you more. And again, it could be Chris Lindstrom, where I remember this to this day. Chris, when he lived off campus, not off campus, but in 2K, just before we had to move for camp, him and his brother, he calls me the night before, hey, me and my brother are packed. We want to be the first ones in the van. Got you, bud. You call me, you say you're already ready. And to be honest, they pre-packed, I think, the van that night, and they just slept on sheets. So they were like, woke up, we're in the van, we got to move our stuff. And I think, again, that's what you want. You want guys that want to be accountable, think ahead, be leaders. And that's why I think Chris is having the success he is. And even his brother, Alex, is having his transitional moment, as I just saw him at whose wedding was it? Oh my goodness. I think Vinny De Palma's wedding. It was just a wedding that I just saw him. But I think again, now they're becoming the men that you hoped to instill in them as you were instilled in, right? As iron sharpens iron, men sharpen men. And I think that's one of the cool things that again, tie back to BC. But again, what is these things that are going to echo in life?
Mm-hmm. And BC is very lucky to have you, Beeks. All these former players that we just mentioned, there were BC student athletes here that went on to do different things, whether it's in the game of football or without, outside the game of football. BC is lucky to have you, Beeks, to have a guy that sets a positive example, that has had the success no matter where he's gone, Beeks, no matter where you have gone, I should say, not no matter where but no matter where you've gone, you've had great success in the classroom, outside the classroom, in college, on the football field, in the NFL, community service, stuff you've done outside the game. Now your post-playing career. You've done great things everywhere you've gone, Beeks. So BC is very fortunate, lucky to have you. I'm lucky to know you. I have one last question for you, Beeks. You obviously mentioned setting a positive example for players. You do have 3 degrees. You have a bachelor's degree from BC, a master's degree from BC, and then a master's from Florida International. How important has education been to you in your life?
Well, I think it's critical. And I think as people think the cost of higher education, will it really change my life? Now, I paid in blood, sweat, and tears, and now little inks and everything else. But I think education unlocks something, right? I had a high school coach. I had my mother, who was the cheer coach. They basically picked every teacher for me. My dad, who I don't know if he would be where he is without getting a scholarship to Dale State. And again, I came to Boston College. I got to pick what major I wanted. Now, there's the core classes that they try to infuse in this liberal arts education, which I think they do a great job formatively with all students. But I also got to say, I want to take childhood growth and development. I want to take TV studio productions, because when I'm doing interviews, I want to know what they mean by, white light testing, fade to black, all these things. Plus, they needed not to have another paper class, but it also is the math that you think you can handle. And again, I don't think A's necessarily show intelligence. It shows, can you take direction? Can you listen? Can you learn? I can probably go get lost in the woods and then come back perfectly fine, where my wife is the seesaw business lady who's probably going to be shooting flares off and screaming out for people to come find her. And because we all have our different talents. And I think that's one of the coolest things about education, that we all learn differently. And I think that's why on the football field, for example, you got a playbook, all right, the textbook. You got video if you're a visual learner. You got walkthroughs, you got practice. There's so many different ways that you learn organically that I think we basically steal everything. Now, they say the meeting room, it's a classroom. There's a projector. All the technology that's in any classroom is literally in a football meeting room, quote unquote. So again, everything that is done in the classroom translates into a meeting room space, right? So then a coach knows, okay, he has learned disability or he doesn't have learned disability, what classes he likes, history, math. How do I teach this guy? Is it by numbers? Is it by gaps? That's why if you're saying it's a 3 tech or a 5 tech, the B gap, the A gap, you get picked up differently by each guy. And then hopefully that combination of memorization and muscle memory and training helps you to produce one heck of a player. And then hopefully in life, some of the things that you're trying to, give them along the way.
There's a lot of transferable skills, though. You mentioned, obviously, when you're doing, classes on education, right? Things like that. You didn't know when you were doing education classes here back in the day when you're a student that you'd be a coach down the line, right? But all those skills can transfer right to what it's like now, not being a player anymore, but now you're teaching the game, right? You got to learn how to relate to players, right? Each player is going to relate differently to, a certain way a coach kind of goes about teaching the game. And you obviously mentioned as well, iron sharpens iron, which your brothers made it as college athletes. Your dad was a college athlete, right? Like you guys all, raised each other around you. And that's what it's about, being a leader. And obviously you understood the importance of education over your life, having 2 master's degrees, Beeks. So that's a big time accomplishment. There's one last question I want to ask you. I know I said that before. This one last one. I want to mention the Community Service Award you won from BC. They recognized you in 2025 with a Community Service Award. What did that mean to you to get that award?
You know what? I was very thankful. Obviously, it's something that is, as an alum, you think that's just what you should do, right? And I'm happy to get it. I'm happy that I got it, because then it's hopefully I can inspire again the next generation that, yes, years after I graduated, nearly almost 20 years after I graduated, I'm still doing the same old core mission that my school taught me. And again, the positives of, if it was during COVID and we're stuffing bags for Thanksgiving, or if we're going to hospitals, or, how can you think of others in your pursuit of just doing good? And sometimes it's getting out of your own head and trying to give positive energy in the universe, or as I like to say, sometimes prayer in action. But it also, humanizes us to say, we are here for each other. And again, I'm very thankful that I was nominated. I'm very thankful that I did win, as I was told to take instruction and say, hey, you won this award, enjoy this award. And I'm very thankful for that.
Mm-hmm. And it's an award you deserve, Beeks, truly. To be recognized by the school, it means a lot. And even without that award, even if you didn't get it, Beeks, to be recognized by, former players, guys that make the NFL, guys you coached in the past, right? At your time, you mentioned obviously Garden City and Florida International. Having those guys recognize you, reach out and say, hey, you were right about this, and you really did, echo this, and I still see what you mean today. Those things are all an honor as well. When you look back at the lessons you were able to teach those guys, and then now giving back to the community, the school, obviously recognizing you for that obviously does mean a lot, and it's something that's very well deserved. As I mentioned, Beeks, BC is lucky to have you, and thank God that Coach O'Brien got you here to BC as a recruit, because obviously if BC never got you, then who knows who would have you today. So thank you so much, Beeks, for all of your time today, all of your insight into your great career as a player, as obviously a coach, and now your post-playing, your post-coaching career. Thank you so much, Beeks, for your time and your insight. It's an honor and a pleasure to know you, and I appreciate all of your time today. Thank you again.
Joe, I appreciate you having me. Again, getting to see your family at the coaching show. And again, you're as much as a BC man, BC legend, because again, you paved the way in small and big ways that have ripple effects that you don't know. So appreciate you having me on. And when this thing is even larger, and maybe I'll have version 2.0 where my phone won't fall in the middle of the interview, I'll have to come back on. So I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Hey, the invite's always there. Anytime you'd like to come on, you're always welcome. Thank you again, Beeks. As I said, we are lucky to have you. I'm lucky to know you. My family's lucky to know you. We love you, Beeks, and looking forward to obviously football season starting very soon. So thank you again.
All right. See you, Joe.
Take care.
Thank you.